In this session, we will be talking about how to scale your Amazon business once you reached 3 million revenue in 1 year, how to scale it to 10 millions, how to be a 8-figure sellers. And today I have two great guests. It's Pradeep and Steve. So I will bring them back. I will bring you here on the stage. Hi, guys.
Hey,
and we will have a short introductions, and then those two great minds will share some strategies and advices, what you have to take into consideration when scaling from 3 to 10 millions your Amazon or e-commerce businesses. So let's start with Pradeep with a short introduction, then Steven, and then we will go to the content.
Well, thank you for this. It's good to be back with my friend Steve and Augustus. Steve will call himself a serial entrepreneur. I will call myself a serial dropout. Dropped out a lot of things. I wasn't the best student, dropped out of high school. Then I got back on the bandwagon, managed to get to Oxford and Harvard. Don't ask me how. And then I dropped out of academia, took a risk, traveled the world, lived in Israel, France, then China. I was lucky enough to be scouted by a very nice Chinese man, and I became VP for a biotech. Done a lot of acquisitions there. Top line revenue of that company was 1.6 billion, managed 600 staff. Then I dropped out of that because no one would give me a job in the UK when I came back during the pandemic. And I started e-commerce, Amazon. It was my first individual business. Done very well there. And we continue to look at certain things like distress assets and consulting. Then recently, in the last 2.5 years, we moved up the chain. We still do Amazon consulting, but we went into raw commodities. So it's been a serial dropout journey, and I like to call myself a serial dropout.
Nice. And Steve, what about you?
Well, I love the framing there. It's fun. Although I do use the term serial entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur is kind of like, just experimenting and again, and ultimately failing again and again. So it's a fun thing to look back and wonder, where you began. So I've been selling online since the late 90s. I've had my own business since the early 90s, kind of home services and retail business. And then started selling online in 1998, Amazon 2001. We had our own website, and my first $1 million day was at around 2006. Just strict D2C, no business or multi-channel. Over time, we did grow to multi-channel and figured out, we can build a real world-class brand, or actually multiple brands, and I'm really excited to be here, and I appreciate the invite and look forward to hanging out with y'all. I can say that over time we've put some points on the board. We passed a couple of years back, we passed well over 2 billion in combined revenues, and we were on a track for, let's say, a lot more. So yeah, we've sold some stuff.
It's good that you have fire behind you. I hope it's warm in your house.
Trying to stay nice and warm in this hot summer. Oh, but Seattle, remember, it is nearly like the North Pole.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for introductions. Tony says hi. So hello, Tony. So those who are tuning in a little bit late, we will be talking about how to scale your Amazon business from 3 million to 8 figures. And Pradeep and Steve, they actually were speaking at our European Seller Conference in Prague in the last years. And I remember Steve was last time, and I think Steve's presentation was rated top 1 by attendees. So it's worth to listen to both of those guys for sure. And I think now we can do short presentations from both experts who will be talking about some advices and strategies you can consider when scaling your businesses. And if you have any questions during this session, type them in the live chat, or if you're watching the replay, type them in the comment section below, and we will ask our guests to answer them later if you're watching the replay. All right, so I think Pradeep, you can prepare your slides. This one. Yeah, we can see that.
Can you see me?
We can see you. Yes.
So yeah, why am I here? I'm still very much interested in e-commerce. Still like my friends in e-commerce, and we still do a lot of consulting. So probably a couple of years ago, and Steve can jump in anytime, we looked at picking up distressed assets. So why am I talking about in this presentation when you go to 3 to 10 million? So we're looking at why people went wrong in that scale up and what actually went wrong. And we had a bunch of data. We actually analyzed, I think the data is next slide, 128 businesses at the end when we were looking at distressed assets. And we looked at 4 things that went wrong. It kept popping up and up and up. It's pure human resource mismanagement, logistic errors, particularly in 3PL, poor inventory management and sourcing errors, and poor terms with suppliers. So these are the 4 things that are going wrong when people tend to scale, because they have early success up to 1 to 3 million and everything goes a bit wrong. So I really wanted to show this data. Again, I'd love to have Steve. Steve, I think, hasn't seen this presentation before. So I'd love to have, you can jump in, Steve, whenever you want. So as I always used to tell my student, life is 3 things. It's a sales game, a numbers game, and a risk game. So when we look at the data and the numbers, in these 128 businesses, we saw a massive percentage of HR spend, part of the total spend. And that's very important to note. We're not just looking at HR, but we're comparing the HR spend to total spend. So particularly when the companies get large, so we're still looking at that 3 to 10 million revenue. And what we see in year 2, if you can see can you guys see my pointer? Say yes.
Yes, we can see.
So year 2 to year 3, it's okay. I'll still say 40% is a lot, but you can see by year 4, when they're 3 to 4 million or up, it gets to 52%. By year 5, most of the companies that were distressed and they were heading the right direction, so scaling to 10 million plus, they went distressed because some of them had a 62% HR spend to total revenue. So again, the data is, this old saying, men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. The numbers here are not lying because when we looked at it, we saw a huge HR spend. So that's something very important to consider. And that's one point we noticed. So again, I like to give specific example. We had to black this out and we looked at some of these, one particular distressed company here. As you can see here, you had a huge spend on consulting, 152,000, legal as well, labor at 1.3, and it just tanked the company. And if you can see here, they were doing very well, and then they just tanked because of their HR spend. So we keep saying this time again. And by the way, I know there may be viewers watching from different sectors, not just e-commerce. This goes just even outside e-commerce. In any kind of company, the HR and hires have to be absolutely right. And when you're in an e-commerce company, you're doing it mostly at first yourself. Then you might be using VRs or VAs, I should say. Maybe some of you are using VRs now, using AI. But what we see repeatedly is that people keep hiring too much talent too early and they spend too much. So just be careful because that really hurts your bottom line. So the second thing I want to talk about is logistics. Again, we analyzed 128 businesses e-commerce, most of them going the right direction, but they're distressed assets by the time we looked at it. And what we saw is a large storage spend. So some of them, if you look at the US, they might be still storing in very expensive areas in Seattle or LA or elsewhere or in Texas, but they might not be using the Midwest or something cheaper. And their storage plan has been very bad, particularly in the UK, inland compared to port. So we saw a huge expenditure in 3PL and storage plan. So when we looked at it and say, hey, if we look at the data, 87% of those companies that were going the right way should have changed their 3PL. It's okay to use Amazon when you first start, but how is the 3PL and logistics managed? And we're also talking about logistics from China or India, where your manufacturer is. People get very comfortable with the same shipping liners, with the same forwarders, with the same 3PLs. In this instance, the 3PL must be changed. And when we looked at the assets, these were brilliant companies. all of them had aged inventory over 180 days. So again, the data doesn't lie. So we had a huge spend in poor 3PL storage. So those who are outside the sector, 3PL is for third-party logistics. So people who outsource your logistics. We really need to look at the supply chain. I always say you trade commodities or you buy or sell, but you're in the game of changing systems. Supplier, logistics, warehouses, shipping, Amazon to the customer. Where is the whole supply chain going? And it comes down to Steve's favorite two words, unit economics. And how is that panning out? So you have to look at how the cost is throughout the supply chain. And one of the things that repeatedly people failed from the 3 million to 10 million plus mark is 3PL. So far we got too much HR spend and too much 3PL. And what we done, part of our consulting, is we actually, one of the examples here is that we just phoned. I'm a big believer in cold calls. I still do receive cold calls from all over the world. And we cold called and video called for better 3PLs. And you can see the effect here when we actually changed 3PLs. This company increased their revenue and CC going up. So it's a huge, just try to get better and better at your logistics and just don't rely on the same things. And the third thing we saw very much is inventory management has been very poor. Average inventory turnover. So it doesn't matter what you're trading or what you're selling, per quarter was very bad. Again, why do these businesses not actually scale in a good manner? The data doesn't lie. Because a lot of these individuals thought, hey, we're doing very well. Q4 is going to be huge. So let's just buy more and more and more and stock more and more and more. It doesn't work like that. More is not always more. Less is more sometimes. So when we look at Q1, 2, and 3, and 4, the data was fascinating. There was too much inventory. And particularly people brought way too much. Across the businesses, 62% more in inventory in Q4. So every quarter, all these businesses that are going the right direction went the wrong direction. So really, this is the sweet spot, 10 to 15% more. If you're succeeding and your business is going from 3 to 10 million plus, you really need to look at how much inventory you need, what are your customers' wants and needs, and what your supply chains are. And the sweet spot, this is my 2 cents, it's not a magic number. We think these are the sweet spots during the every quarter. So Q4 is 20 to 30% more if your brand is right and everything's going well. And look at this. This company here, the numbers don't lie, thought, hey, we're going to have a great Q4. Their spend was 366% more because they thought they can do a bulk savings. Totally went wrong and tanked the company. So really, optimism is good. But, you got to be in reality. When I was 14 years old, my teacher told me, hey, Pradeep, are you an optimist or realist? And I said, I'm an optimist living in reality. And you really need to live in reality, but be optimistic about your numbers. And the fourth thing I want to talk about is poor terms and how you negotiate terms. When we're in Rome, we can talk about psychology and how to actually negotiate terms. But the numbers here are poorly bad. So we analyzed 18 businesses. I'm just going to look at the top 18 worst ones because it's too much data for one slide. And we looked at how much COGS is inconsistent with supplier payment. So if we were meant to negotiate, how much money per unit can we save if we go to 3 to 4 or 5 suppliers? We're actually seeing this in the commodity space. If we go to 5 different mines or 5 shippers, or in Amazon, we go to 5 different in China, or even compared to Vietnam or India, what's the best price I can get? Again, some of these founders, or when they scale up, get very lazy and they become very chummy and friend-like with their suppliers. Yeah, it's good to keep relationships, but it's business. So don't get focused on one supplier. Source it out and see what happens. This is a very busy slide. Apologies, but in the bottom here, you can see the top 18 businesses failed and how much we could save when we renegotiated each. So every business, my team went and said, hey, if we're going to buy this distressed asset, how much money can we save? You can see here we have a 90% save on $4 here. This company here, number 18, was the worst. So fascinating example. They had I think some kind of bike or a scooter, and they were doing very well. And what happened was they were actually packing in one place, and the supplier didn't say, hey, this kind of stamp or their need in one of their packaging had to go somewhere else. So they bulk shipped this into another place in China, stamped it, put it back to their original supply, and then shipped it out. So these things, if you're not familiar with your supply chain or really negotiating, talking with your suppliers, will throw you off. Eventually, when the prices went up, we actually looked at this and we could save $16 if we just not label that individual frame. So some of these things, you really need to get to the nitty gritty of things. So you can see here, we saved a lot of money because they didn't do any unit economics, and Steve will touch upon it soon. So when we went and sourced 3 to 5 suppliers, we got better days. So up to 5 suppliers. So we can say, hey, this supplier gave us this, what can you do? Hey, he gave us this, what can she do? So we went up to 78 days of terms when we have 5 suppliers. So again, number of suppliers and number of countries you do business with is actually very important as well. So that's the end of my slideshow. But I really wanted to recap here, if I can come back, is that it really comes down to 4 things: unit economics, how you handle HR, your terms, and how you look at logistics. That's what we're looking at backwards, how to successfully scale over 3 million plus into the 10 million. And what I really want to do in Rome is totally different. It's not going to be a talk. I will talk about certain things, but I'm going to do with Augustus and Steve is we're going to go away and we look at a day where we look at scenario-based firing. So if you have a board member, 5 board members, this is the urgent danger of your business. What's the risk analysis? How are you going to do this? How are you going to come up with terms? How are you going to negotiate these bank charges? Everyday crises, and how we're going to go away with risk and overcome those risks. So I'm really excited. Hopefully we looked at some real world data and seeing how you can scale from 3 to 10 million plus.
Thank you very much, Pradeep. Pradeep mentioned a few times the Rome, and there is a reason why we invited Pradeep and Steve here. We still didn't mention our Orange Klik Elite Mastermind, which is happening in Rome in October 1st and 5th. We can go in more details a bit later, and Pradeep already gave some ideas what we will do at that event. So yeah, for now, I just mentioned that, and then later, after Steve's presentation, we can go in more details about what's going to happen in Italy. So thank you, Pradeep, for these insights. I see we already have some questions, and also lights out says Pradeep is full of knowledge. We could learn from him. So great that you enjoy. All right. So Steve, let's go through your few slides, and then we will take questions and talk about the event in Rome.
That sounds good. Well, everybody, good news for you is we've set this up like one of those reality TV shows. I'm going to disagree with everything Pradeep just said, and then we're going to fight it out live. No, I'm just kidding. He's 100% on point, and he got into kind of the real world effects that happen to people when they're you get to a certain point in your business, and then you start to struggle. You start to wonder, what's going on? Why is this happening? And sometimes you have more questions than you have answers. And so I'm going to share my screen here, and then I'm going to kind of tell you from the less number side. I think Pradeep did the exact right job, showed and proved the numbers. And I'm now going to get into the like, why is this happening kind of question. Okay, good. So listen, I want everybody to concentrate on this image just a bit, right? Because you've already climbed somewhere. You've already built a business to some level. And when you got to wherever you are, you're probably like, holy crap, that was amazing. I never expected to get here. Whether you're at, 1 million, 3 million, 4 million, whatever you're at. But then you look up and you're like, oh my goodness, there's more to go, right? So yes, you've reached a certain point, but there's more to go. You've climbed a mountain, and everybody else, by the way, they think you're on top of the world. right? They think, oh, nothing could go wrong, everything's great. But the truth that nobody really will say out loud is that success can often feel lonely, right? It can also feel confusing, which is even worse, by the way. And you work so hard to get here, but now what, right? And growth feels much harder. And by the way, when you talk and you try to figure out some of these things, a lot of people go, oh, it used to be so easy back in fill in the blank. And by the way, I've been doing this so long. You know, when we started in 98, people in 2001 were like, oh, so much easier in 99. And 2004, they're like, oh, 2001 was the glory days. And in 2008, they're like, oh, I wish I could be in 2005. Right. So everybody has this, you know, the past is always better. And when you've been around as long as I have, you can just kind of put it all into perspective and not panic. So the whole question that you know, or series of questions you should need to start asking yourself is, if growth feels harder than it did in the beginning, what do I do about it? Right. And if you feel like you're working even harder, but the profit is less, or the growth is less, as PRADEEP just demonstrated very skillfully with all of those numbers, you know, why is that happening and what do I do about it? And even more, you know, what if you stay in this pattern? You know, if your growth stalls out, you know, I don't know each of your individual plans, but some people want to sell their company. Some people want to build a, you know, an empire of their own. Some people want to create a family dynasty. Other people just say, I just want to couch surf and just make it go. But you want to feel comfortable in whatever you're building. And this is the founder's paradox, everybody. You're there, but ultimately you are alone. And I can just tell you, the only other people who understand that are founders. Hello, we're all founders here. So I want you to really think about success as a pit stop along the way, right? It's not a place that, you know, is the end of the journey. It's just a milestone on the never-ending climb up the next obstacle or challenge. And by the way, that's the greatest thing ever. All of us need to fight dragons in our lives, and we need to keep doing hard things to feel alive and feel valuable and feel fulfilled, which is part of what you want in life. So here's another reality I find often of founders, particularly the almost accidental founders, right? A lot of folks, they're like, oh, I heard about this course. I took this course. I can't believe it actually worked. And now I'm selling $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever it is. And you're kind of surprised. It's like, you know, I was a school teacher, or I was a, you know, bus driver, a finance guy at a corporate thing. And now I've got my own brand. Like, it's accidental founder, right? But that turns into kind of a reluctant leader, because you're like, oh, I don't want to be one of those bad bosses. And, you know, I want to, you know, be good, but, you know, I still want progress. And listen, a lot of us just simply don't know how to lead. And I count myself among those that had to learn the skills of leadership. I did many, many things that were, well, I'll just say it because I did it. They were idiotic. And I want to help you guys avoid some of those things. So, you know, let me ask you this. What if you are the reason the business isn't scaling? Right? That's kind of a real core question I want you to ask yourself. If you're not failing because it's a lack of drive, but you often, or entrepreneurs, founders in general, they often fail because they become the bottleneck in the business. You were extraordinary in that startup mode, right? You loved it, but now you're in scale mode, and that's two different games, right? Startup is that scrappy, I don't know if this will even work, and I'm getting lucky and a few things are breaking my way. And now you're in scale mode and you're like, holy crap, this is a whole new thing. And I want you to really consider, you know, some of the different questions that happen between startup and scale up. So even though you've built everything with your own hands and you know how everything works, sometimes you don't let it go. And sometimes you need to, because you just are flat exhausted. Sometimes you're, you know, managing chaos is what we like to say. And that's the real question at the end of the day is, are you going to become a leader, or are you just going to manage the day-to-day chaos? If you are not comfortable delegating, even though we don't want to let HR run away, I always say keep it tight, right? Keep that organization, keep your cost structure, fight for every unit economic advantage you can get. But there are some things that are way better to delegate and outsource than you doing it. Your time as the founder has extraordinary value, right? And so if you're sitting there handling customer service inquiries, you should be a $500 an hour person. And if you could get a $10 an hour, $20 an hour person to do that, you can sub in euros if you want. It's okay. All of those things need to line up according to the value that they add to the business, right? So contribution input of who's doing it should line up with the output of the value to the business. And then finally, what if you are that bottleneck? And so, yeah, you have some team members, but they have to ask I can't even speak now. You have to answer every question and make every decision. And all you've done is you've just created a wider array of decision-making that you have to do. And then sometimes people go out and execute it. And that is one of the most dangerous places to be, by the way. I call it a permission-based problem. If you don't give them permission to go solve it and they can come to you and you solve it, they'll always come to you and never grow. So leadership is much better than chaos. And, I think people often get sucked into their own ego that they're the only ones who could do it. And I guarantee you, every job in the companies I've run, which, often were, hundreds and hundreds of employees, there's always somebody who could do each individual thing I do better than me. The only thing they can't do is have the gut instincts better than me. I got the gut instincts, and so do most founders. In fact, I would argue all successful founders who achieve millions in sales per year have that gut. Otherwise, they wouldn't have got there. All right. Now, I want you guys to be curious, right? It doesn't matter what business you're in. I want you to always be curious. And PRADEEP led to a bunch of questions that you can start asking, like, am I buying right? Do I have the right terms? Is there a better way to do this? Is there a better location? Is there a better, like, all of these things are questions, right? And so being curious is really, really important. But here's some strategic stuff to start thinking about. Transformation doesn't begin with tactics, right? It starts with questions, and the correct questions, no less. So let me ask you the three that have changed my life, right? What if what would break in your company if you doubled your revenue tomorrow, right? What would happen? And then what's the thing in your business, in your life, that you're tolerating that's draining your energy? These very, very things. And then if you had to start over from scratch in the same business, what would you do different? And the answers to those questions will give you extraordinary potential to really reset and assist your scale efforts. These are not fun questions. They're not even polite questions, but they are powerful, right? And because when you stop lying to yourself, you start leading yourself. And if you lead yourself, then you will be able to lead the team. So I hope that you maybe feel a little uncomfortable when you start thinking about these things. What indeed would break if my sales double tomorrow? But I want you to be uncomfortable so later you can become unshakable, right? You have to really go through that firestorm to come out the other side tough. All right. So we've talked about, some of the questions you should ask, but now I want to talk about some of the pillars that you need to create a successful business. First of all, you've got to have the vision, right? So we've got these 4 pillars. We're going to start with vision, but they're not just pillars of ancient Rome, even though these are fun columns that I have taken pictures of over the years in the forum area. But these 4 pillars are what you're going to scale your business with, right? And again, we're back to uncomfortable truths. Most founders, right, they're only solid in 1 or 2 of these. Sometimes none of these, but we'll just spot you 1 or 2. So if I asked your team what your vision is, would they give me the precise echo of your words? Would they be able to tell me the vision of the company? And by the way, if they can't, then you guys are pulling different directions. Literally, you have a bunch of rowers in the boat and everybody's, potentially going the other ways. The vision should be clear, it should be concise, and it should be completely consistent throughout the organization. And everybody on your team should know it. And by the way, are you building a dream team, something that you're really proud of, or are you just kind of throwing in the convenient, well, I found a VA and they've been pretty good, and I hope that works. And I'm not against VAs, by the way. We have many so-called virtual assistants, but we turn them into real team members for the long term that we're proud of. And if we have to invest in them, we will invest in them. Zig Ziglar used to have a saying, something like, the only thing worse than paying for training of a person and then having them leave, right? Because no business owner wants to pay for training and then have the person depart, is not training them and having them stay, right? That's the worst. So let's think about, how do we get the right people and how do we help them become just world-class experts? And then finally, are you busy? We all are busy, but are you actually productive, right? Those are different questions. And I want you guys to really think about that on a day-to-day basis. Is the activity you're doing actually producing something of value? Remember, we talked about inputs and outputs. Or are you just kind of running laps just to feel busy and feel like you're doing something? Because that's what we call self-sabotage, right? If you're doing that. So, and finally, I want you to believe that you can do it, right? Too often, founders are stuck with, well, I don't know how to do it. I've never been here. I've never done this. And sometimes our own core beliefs start to break down. But I guarantee you, if you apply yourself, if you start thinking about these things, that anybody can build a 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 million level business. And it ain't that hard. I've done it multiple times and helped other people do it multiple times. So the hard thing is executing. The hard thing is learning. So I want to talk about how we don't just fix things, we kind of help rebuild the core philosophy. And finally, I want to just share a little bit of fun with you. So Rome was actually my favorite city in the world. I don't even think Augustus knows that. But Rome is more than a city, right? It's a symbol. It's a symbol of reinvention, right? Of rebirth, the eternal city, right? And sometimes the best way that we move forward is to get out of that everyday noise that we're in day to day, right? And I use this, I think I shared this on stage in Prague, but I want you guys to, break out of norm, break the paradigms of normals, I like to say. Get those synapses firing. And honestly, Rome is just a wonderful place. And so, but there's also very, very intriguing questions that you can answer, right? You're in, a city that you could look at a skyline to spend there 2,000 years. And suddenly the bottleneck, the challenge that you've had that seemed immovable before, it just kind of melts away and you start to see more clearly. This is what happens when you break the paradigms of normal. So, I would tell you that, whether it's a reset or recalibration, but stop surviving, start scaling, and then, ask yourselves these final 3 questions. What would it be worth financially, mentally, happiness-wise, fulfillment-wise, that if you could get unstuck, what would that be worth? That's the real value of what these types of things are. And what if one simple conversation, maybe it's with me, maybe it's with Pradeep or Augustas, maybe it's with one of your fellow travelers and other participants, which is often the case, and it just completely opens up everything. Just a single conversation, what could that do? And then what if you do decide that, I don't have to struggle, I don't have to survive, I need to scale because I can now see the future more clearly. That's what I'm asking you guys to consider. And that's all I have for you, Augustus.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Steve. And thanks again for mentioning Rome. And Rome is the place where we are intending to collect 17 high-earning Amazon sellers. Hopefully, most of them will come from Europe. Of course, we're inviting other regions or other continents to join us as well. But we believe that there are not so many events where high-level Amazon sellers could meet in person in Europe. So, and most of the time, these events are organized by American influencers. but this time we're trying to create something of our own, and we invite everyone to join us in Rome, where you will meet Pradeep and Steve. And as you see on the screen, you will find the link to this website, or you see the website link also on the screen as well. You can open the page and read a little bit more for whom is this event, for whom it is not. You can read more about both experts you would meet in person. And the idea is to have 3 full days of learning. We would have 2 days of full content. There will be workshops by Pradeep and by Steven. And one day we'll just go out to Rome, explore the nice places in Rome, and you will have a lot of time to informally talk to other participants and to both experts, which you see today in our session. And actually, talking about workshops, maybe each of you could share a little bit more what you're planning to do. It will be half-day workshops from both of you. Maybe, Pradeep, we can start with you. What people can expect from half-day spending with you.
Yeah, I love working with Steve because I think we just supplement each other very well. Every time he finishes, I feel like I'm in a Southern Baptist church in America, and I want to stand up and saying, "Amen." You know,
hallelujah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But no, I wanted to go into the data and numbers, particularly here, but also I really want real world situations. So my past experience in corporate, startup, and now medium, large term, what are the things that individuals will face in that 3 to 10 plus million kind of scale every day, even from Amazon shutdowns to supply chain logistic negotiations, political instability. What happens if certain countries invade other countries? What happens if you have a new president in the US and tariffs go up? Real world scenarios that can, what happens if one of your talents gets poached, and you're on a 3 to 10 million kind of vision, as Steve said, or what can we do? So split into groups and see real world scenarios. And I'll talk about some data and some facts as well, but I want to get to the nitty gritty. I want to fight it out, talk amongst the participants, and really see a scenario based, because it really worked. When I ran labs in science or corporate teams, I used to say Mike Tyson's saying, everyone has a strategy until you get punched in the face. So we can have all the risk analysis, but once things go wrong, it's when teams come together and how you actually brainstorm it out. And I want that, because once you keep drilling that in, I call it rehearsalization. I do it every morning. I walk around with my coffee, and my family and my friends think I'm crazy. Rehearsalization, those scenarios, going through your head. Once you get like 10 or 15 scenarios, or if you've seen it all together, you can actually pick out the actual answers from different scenarios and actually work it through. So I really want that in that workshop, and I'm actually quite excited because I can really practice what I've actually seen in real life in corporate and startup and even academia into this workshop with people. So I'm excited. That's what we're going to do in Rome.
Cool. Amazing. And Steve, what about your half a day?
Yeah, well, let me read here. I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's see. No. So I'm going to share with you guys the same things that I have shared with my executives for years about how to build real businesses. So you guys, it's hard to imagine if you're starting out and you're fighting fires every day, right? You're just in the trenches, and you're just, like Pradeep said, you're getting punched in the face routinely, right? So when that's happening, it's hard to fly up and go, what happens when I have, leaders, CFO, COO, CTO, all these people, and they have their own groups of teams, and so what happens is the founder, me, I have to fly up to that higher level. You have 500 or 600 employees. You go, all right, I've got to teach all of my leadership team so they can teach their leadership team so that it gets out to the organization. And so I'm going to share with you what I share with my executives, how to become not just a leader, but somebody who can actually inspire and refine your vision to a level that you can't possibly imagine. So finding your why, we're going to get into it. It's going to be not just a philosophical session, but a action plan. And in fact, I think I have a 90-page document everybody gets as a takeaway that will give you worksheets. How do you find your why? How do you build your org chart? How do you write your company story? Like, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty that is the basic foundation for every company. And too often I've seen companies, and Pradeep and I looked at a ton of these distressed companies, and they were able to build, revenues of X amount. It doesn't even matter if it's 2 million or 5 million or 8 million. Like, they were able to get there, and then they thought they had all the answers. They were king of the world. And ultimately many of those businesses failed, to be honest with you, because they didn't stay disciplined. They just figured, they're like the Midas touch. Everything they do is good. And sometimes that works for some period of time, but it will never work forever. So I want to give you guys really hard truths, but also action steps that you can deal with every truth and build a life and a business that is worth having.
Cool. Thank you very much, Steve. And once again, you will find the link to this event in the video description below. And if you have questions to Steve or Pradeep or to us about this event, just type them in the comments section below, or write us an email at team@orangeclick.com. And now let's get to a few questions. I see Tony was asking while Pradeep was presenting. So it's for you, the question: what is the strategies to find products to source locally in US and Canada to avoid duties, shipping times, etc.? The biggest prices problem is huge increase in price of the product.
Yeah, so one big point and one kind of small point, I shamelessly promote Rome, is that both Steve and I will come to Rome with a mindset. I'm not saying, Tony, please come to Rome, is that we'll look at the nitty gritty. We can talk about PPC and CPA and all these terms, but we look high level as well. So kind of that's the point here. And the second point I want to talk about is directly to your question. We actually found when we were looking at all these companies and ourselves sourcing products, is that a source locally is really good. Yeah, if you can source locally, it keeps the cost down. You can use third-party software to look at things that can actually give you value, but really source locally. We are now shipping things from South Africa to China to America. We're really looking at, or my team's looking, I should say, is local tariffs, looking at what actually the US is different from the EU, and what kind of products or what kind of commodity in our sense is actually tax-free, not. So those change over time as well. So you look at those technology softwares and also look locally to see what kind of tariffs you can avoid. But if you can look at the unit economics, sourcing locally is easier because logistics is cheaper. But if you're looking abroad, you look at 3 or 4 different suppliers, or 5 in our case, as we saw the data, and look at different countries as well. And then what you do is work backwards and say, hey, what's the cheapest forwarder, and then the port costs and FBA costs and so forth. So there's really not one secret answer, but there's several answers to your questions.
Steve wanted to say something? No.
I can do. I mean, there's been a time or two I've sourced something. And I know Tony. It's great to see online Tony and the others. So the first thing I would do is I would look at your industry, whatever it is, and I would go to a trade show and start to figure out who some of the players are in your space. So if you want US or Canadian manufacturing, you're often going to find some hooks there. Many times, this is true in China largely, but it's also true, I think, even more so in North America. Manufacturers are terrible at marketing. And so they just kind of sit back and wait for the customers to come to them. And when they do, they're not even that interested. So just expect, if you do find some manufacturers, and you can in most every industry, they won't be super excited to talk to you unless you represent large volume. So as a quick example, we're helping some friends source in the US, and it's taken a ton of effort. And even as we're doing it, we're competing. Some of this is metal type products. We're competing with guys like GM and Ford, right? And so we're like, hey, we'd like to get 100,000 units, and like if you talk to the average Amazon seller, 100,000 sounds like a lot, and we might do even 100,000 every quarter, right? And these are, let's call them $100 items, but these manufacturers are like, if we're not running the lines at 5 million units a day or a month or whatever, then we're not even going to break even. So prepare yourself for those different economics. Maybe it is wise for you to try the North America, but if your scale is too small, and it may not be viable, is the point, until you have a level of scale. The other thing, and this is a free tip that works for everybody, go to Import Yeti and look up who your competition is buying from, right? Go to ChatGPT Research 4.5. So ChatGPT 4.5 preview or Grok 4 DeepSeek. Make sure you turn on the deep research function and just go, I need to know who the manufacturers are for these brands, or I'm making this, go find me every manufacturer in America, and you'll be surprised that there are breadcrumbs that AI can pick up.
All right, great. Yeah, AI is getting amazing, and today I even found another agent type of AI which does in front of my eyes all the research in the browser, and it's still kind of with the free credits. It's nice. I think it was Manu AI. Manu, yeah.
Yeah, Manus.ai. Yeah, fun.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's take one more question. What was the biggest bottleneck you faced around mid 7 figures, and how did you fix it? I think it's more for Steven, probably, because you went from 7 to 8 figures.
Yeah, and then to 9. So first of all, when you go to war and then you come back, it's hard to remember all the little details. It's hard to remember. In fact, where humans are built to remember the good times, right? So even on the good times, there were challenges. And so the biggest bottleneck that I faced would include things like, how do you find and then train a team and then align them with the vision? Very, very difficult, because at some point you need to be able to have other people managing customer service or logistics or forecasting or whatever it is. Even though you need to do a bunch of the work up front yourself, there are times where you're going to have to add on to the team. So building the team is difficult. And then getting that alignment took me a long time. It really was the hardest thing, for me to learn how to be a good manager. And I would even say today I'm still not the best manager. In fact, I try to only manage, a few people directly and then have them manage the other folks, because I just can't wrap my head around some of the methods that you need to manage people with, which are empathetic and nice and things like that. I'm like, hey, I want some numbers. Let's get some things done. I'm excited. So know yourself, know how to build a team, and then focus on what that vision is and where you expect to go. And the thing that helped me the most is when in my late 20s, probably 26, 27, I had a mentor, and they helped me find my personal why. And it was the most powerful thing that I've ever done. And it remains a thing that I kind of repeat, because your why over time can change. You get kids, you get older, you're, different businesses, whatever. But that personal why was my ticket to freedom.
If I may come in as well,
Yes.
from my corporate experience itself, obviously this spans, again, across industries, particularly e-commerce. When you looked at 7 figures to 8, it's actually the banking and how the people, when they actually scaling, get enough money to scale even more. And people keep forgetting, it doesn't matter if you're corporate or not, it always comes down to money and how much you can get. Sometimes the profit you reinvest and you need more. So how we fixed it was actually scaling back products, saying, do we really need a new product here in this new marketplace? One of the things I didn't mention in data is that people expanded too quickly, too aggressively. So sometimes you keep at one marketplace with your key products and not expand the brand too much. So that really fixes your costs, and also you got to get out there and ask for money, and also work the banks to a certain extent, because then that scale is numerically possible.
Great. Thank you for.
Yeah, sorry, Augustus, but capital is king. Yeah.
One more question. How do you have some practical advices when you are dealing with decision fatigue and found a burnout when you are scaling? Pradeep, do you have some advice?
I work out in the morning. Working out always burns me out. But I'm sorry if this sounds cheesy or corny, but I love what I do. I don't know what burnout is. I haven't had a holiday saying, "Hey, I'm facing burnout here." I've had holidays that kind of energizes me and gets me going, but I've never had a burnout, because I always find curiosity, as Steve mentioned, in new things and ask questions. And also, it comes down to my big belief: if you wake up in the morning and walk around and think of how grateful you are in the position you are, and what kind of strategies you might come up with, and play with your scenarios, you don't find burnout, because you already have the solutions in your head and you can kind of predict what's coming. So yeah, working out actually kept me fit and kept me going. But really, go through your scenarios, be grateful. Again, sounding a bit cheesy and corny, but those kind of mitigate burnout. If you do have burnout, walk away for a bit and come back, and you'll be clear-eyed.
Steve, do you always loved what you did?
No, I often hate it and burn out routinely. Yeah, so it's first of all, Pradeep's advice is excellent, which is, the attitude of gratitude starts to really heal a bunch of things. And whether you want to go work out or just go on a golf game or do something to disconnect. For a long time in my early 20s, we were starting to do some stuff, and I would just be working 7 days a week, just going like a maniac. And then I went on a week-long mastermind cruise, and like the world opened up to me, right? So I was terrified to leave my business and all the people and everything. We were only doing a few $1 million at that time, but I had never left the company, so I was terrified to do it. But it just seemed like this mastermind was worthwhile, and in fact, it was the greatest thing, because I disconnected from the day-to-day. The house didn't fall down, and I learned a bunch of things. And I just, again, to not sound cheesy, but the why is your barometer to check every decision against. And then it makes decision fatigue fall away, because you don't make decisions that aren't aligned with your why or your strategic objective. And everything just gets easier, right? Somebody go, "Hey, I got this great idea." And in most times, the shiny object, it's like, that is kind of fun. I wonder how we could do that. And you just start going, because we're all attracted to the next interesting, fun thing. But what if, and I think Pradeep alluded to this, what if the right choice for your business is being a 10 or 20 million or 50 million type of company, instead of everybody trying to build the $10 billion company? Like, what if that's the best thing for you? And your why will help tell us that, right? And so, getting that alignment with your life. The business is here to serve your life, everybody, not the other way around. And I would highly recommend, the advice Pradeep gave, which is, get out there, do the, the workouts morning, night. I don't know what it matters, but definitely disconnect. And don't forget, we're super lucky. Every one of us, anybody who's talking, listening right now, we're very, very lucky to have what we have and have the options that we have. Never take that for granted, and then build upon it. Because, we can't just stop and go, "Oh yeah, well, everything's fine, it'll be okay." We still have to work hard and we have to do things. But it happens to me.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to come back in. I didn't do justice to the first point about decision fatigue. Sometimes when we look at organizations and when I consult, it's a lack of delegation, and you're making too many decisions at your point. Yeah. Jeff Bezos said it very nice at a conference. He's got, people always talk about sleeping 4 hours. I've done this. And he goes, "No, I get great sleep," because he goes, "And I tell my executives to get great sleep, because you're only good as a small amount of decisions you make." So at this level, you're making small amount of decisions. So if you have decision fatigue, that means you're making too many decisions and you're not delegating. So that's the first part. And the second point is building on from Steve's point of view. Answer is that sometimes we looked at companies and we still look at companies. The question I ask in every deal is, what is my exit strategy? And sometimes the decisions you're making or scaling too fast is you don't know if you want to exit at a certain point or you want to keep scaling. And that's very important, because then your decisions are reverse engineered, short term, medium term, and long term. And so that also avoids decision fatigue.
Great. Thanks for this advice. I see Tony says, thank you guys as well. I think we answered his question earlier. So thanks a lot for spending this hour with us. I wanted to also mention one more time that some of you were waiting and hope to meet you in Rome, in Italy, and on October 1st to 5th. It will be 3 full days with 1 day arrival and the 5th day departure. 3 full days of being together, 17 high-level Amazon sellers and 2 experts, Steve and Pradeep. We will meet on the first day at the welcome dinner, and then 3 full days of content, learning, workshops, being together, sharing ideas, and solving each other problems. And then we will depart as big friends, and probably, hopefully, some of you will keep in touch afterwards. I think this is the idea, is to meet, to know who you are, who other in the room are, and then to keep friendship and keep communicating. I think these kind of online masterminds later also give a lot of value. All right. Thank you very much, Steve and Pradeep. And see you in our events.
Love it. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye. And if you want to learn more about how to scale your business, check this video, which will give you some extra tips. So check this out.